Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order so we can go through. I sent out an early type of Volpe report without putting in the final numbers. And I did that just so that we have a sense of where things are. I'm anticipating tomorrow we'll see the actual number. The fact of the matter is that while it looks like it currently is a 3.11% increase, because the grand list went down, even though our collection rate went up, it was 8.9, and then they subtracted plus 25 basis points was the actual collection rate, but the 5-year moving average actually went up based upon last year's. But because the denominator will be less, the increase will be more than the 3.1% if no other changes occur. So I handed this out just to start going. I also did some, adjusted versus not adjusted. One of the adjustments are that instead of having a net for Park and Rec, which is what they used to do, they grossed up the expense. They are now recording the expenses separately and the revenue separately. So while that's good, when I went to look at what the difference was between last year's revenue and what they're saying last year's revenue was in comparison, the difference is an even 500,000. And I want to delve into that a little bit more because I don't believe it was an even 500,000. So I want to understand what the adjusted number really should be. Was it a profit from their two programs? Was it a loss? And let's adjust it accordingly. But that's something we're going to have to explain when we go through budget time. The other thing is while the Board of Ed looks in capital as if they went up slightly by 300,000, we should remember that the Board of Ed had about 1.5 million that was bonded. So really their capital is really down this year by about 1.2. The Board of Selectmen may have also had one or two smaller items bonding. And so one of the things that I would like to sort of work on is over the last, I figured 4 to 5 years, go back and see what the original capital request was, and then for the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed, and then see what was bonded so we can sort of track what's going on. Because what's requested and what the taxpayers are paying for may not be in line. And yes, we do have two large building projects there, the cafeteria and the public works garage, but we could put those below the line. We also should be cognizant of things like the 300,000 that they just requested for the electrical panels, or really capital out of cycle. So I thought if we did that, it would be interesting to see what the real requests were and how those are tracking versus what we're bonding in there. So that's one of the projects that I'd like some assistance on. But since I'm not adhering to my agenda, I guess maybe I should go back to it. One of the things I'd like to do is there are 4 or 5 major items that are still not in this final budget. And I'd really like to go around the room and find out what everybody's opinion is of that, so that when we're discussing with the Board of Finance, we at least can say this is the consensus of the committee. And if it's split 50-50, we're going to tell them it's split 50-50, So The first one is investment income is currently recorded in the current proposed budget at $300,000, but in their year to date, they already have $267,000 of earnings in 6 months, and that really didn't have the full effect of 2 rate increases, one in September and one in December. So I'm sure their earnings are higher. And I'm going to pass it over to Bert on that because Bert met with Joan, and he's done some analysis and is much more adept at explaining certain things in this area than I am.
Thank you, Jack. So we know that interest rates went up, so it's surprising that when they had $267,000 in 1 year at low interest rates, they are budgeting $300,000 when we know it's in higher interest rate environment.
That's for 6 months of the 267.
Right. So that's your actual, for the first 6 months. Actually, when I came to see Joan, it was already higher because it included some interest income for January. The town treasury believes that they are well advised to budget very conservatively. And I agree with a conservative approach in general, or especially for Treasury, but in this case, I think they're shooting too low because it's obvious that other than interest rates are falling off the cliff, they will make a higher net interest surplus than they are currently projecting or budgeting. I also know, of course, that the Treasury or the Treasurer is an elected official, so there's a little bit of a tension between what the town can do and what the Treasurer is responsible, because the Treasurer is ultimately responsible to the taxpayer and her own constituents. And she has done a good job because we went back and looked on some of the situation in 2007 when the financial crisis just broke, and she took all the money out from the state of Connecticut short-term fund when that fund threatened to break the buck, which is what happens in the money market when you don't have a dollar for every dollar invested, you can't return a dollar. But nothing actually happened, so I did some research on that. The state had one SIV, a structured investment vehicle that they should not have owned. And there was an outlandish type of investment product that they peddled during or before the financial crisis. And that was $100 million. And the state lost $25 million on that. So they recovered $75 million. With the $25 million, they had to make up from the reserve fund. The reserve fund was twice as much as they needed for that, so nothing happened, and they have changed their ways. So one should consider if you could resume investing with the state, but that's really her authority. If you do invest with the state, you get the highest interest rate, short-term interest rate, backed by government securities that are available to the town treasurer under the existing guidelines. Other than that, I would be very happy to help to look at what the investments actually are right now. And if not only the budget number can be improved, but also the actual revenue. Because no matter what is budgeted right now, that's just an assumption for the next year. We don't know how much is coming in. We think much more. But if you budget low, that doesn't hurt your income statement. But what does hurt your income statement is you invest too conservatively in products that might not be the best product for the money. And so that's not something that we really should be worried about from FNB, because I think that should be dealt with by the Board of Finance, actually.
Right. We cannot increase revenue on the Board of Selectmen. We have line item veto. We can veto any capital for either the Board of Ed or the Board of Selectmen. We can't play with revenue. My concern is that if you've already had approximately $270,000, and if I multiply that times a year, being that the rates are higher than they were when you started the first 6 months, you end up with $540,000. Recording $300,000 for revenue is a 3 basis point difference, approximately, to our taxpayers. And I don't believe we should be taxing for something where we're pretty sure our revenue should be higher. They should at the very least have about $500,000 in investment income, and to cover it.
That's without even making any input as to investment decisions. It's just strictly budgeting estimates.
It's
So
just
what did we do to make the 267? Do we know?
the same thing. She's laying it off at banks, essentially. You're putting it overnight money or long-term money over at the banks, and you.
Because I heard some feedback that the rates weren't that high for overnight rates and stuff like that, or maybe they're changing. I know those can change pretty fast. She must have good reason to believe that she can't replicate the performance of the first 6 months.
There's no reason other than I want to be conservative and I want to make the funds that I have. There is none.
When you met with her, did she give the rationale for the $300,000?
Well, it's 267 in the first 6 months.
No, I know that.
She thinks that she can't. She wants to be on the conservative side, and I think that. Yes, she is an elected official and can independently really make a lot of these decisions. But as far as the budget is concerned, a budget is something that where not only the person who runs the fund has a say in, but also everyone else, including at that point the FNB, because we represent the taxpayer. We don't want the mill rate to go up any more than it's supposed to because we want to be too conservative.
Did she say she anticipates rates falling or something?
No.
Didn't the yield curve invert during that market blow up in December? Didn't we have a strange? I haven't been in touch with it in a long time, but there's a reasonable chance, and you'd have to ask her.
Okay. I think she has it in money market accounts. Now, what people don't realize is a distinction between money market accounts and money market funds. And since the laws have changed dramatically after the financial crises, most of these money market funds are government backed, including the one that the state of Connecticut offers. But the money market accounts that banks have they haven't changed much. The interest rate has not gone up at the same level as you would have expected it to go up when the federal funds rate goes up. So I know that I know 3 banks in Darien that still pay under 1% for money market funds. And so in order to get higher return, you have to really analyze the opportunities that are out there, provided there's not additional risk. We all know when you have lower return on your money, the assumption is you also probably have lower risk. This is something we have to look at.
But that's separate and distinct than the budget.
Yes.
The fact is that I've spoken to several bankers that I know, and even when I was in banking, if the government is giving, when I worked for Chase, and it hasn't really changed much based upon speaking to several bankers that are in this business now that I know that are still there. If a bank's going to drop $5 million, there's $5 million of U.S. securities that are securing that. That's just basically how it works. So I'm not worried about what the yield is on what it is. I'm just saying, come on. You have 270,000 in the first 6 months, and that was before 2 rate increases occurred. There's not, and we're not having a great drawdown on our cash funds that all of a sudden we worry that the balance changed. It is not unreasonable to, at least at the very least, increase your investment income by 500,000. And it's just it's something that the Board of Finance talked about last year when they had a very low rate. It's just, this is 200,000 added on, and I bet you that we're probably up at 600,000 at the end of the year. But it's a budgeting issue, not to me an investment issue.
So in essence, you're saying like we would tell someone that they need to.
Oh yeah.
That if they needed to bring their budget down because we think they're spending too much, we'd ask them. This way, we're thinking that you're asking you to make more money.
No, I'm asking you just to record in the budget the money that it looks like. I mean, if the funds.
I mean, she's in essence saying that she can only make 300,000.
Well, that's what she said, and
right. And so we're saying you need to make more.
No, I'm not telling her.
You need to expect more because
we need to budget more.
Your estimate
It's we're both saying the same thing, but really, when you make a budget, when you say these are my revenues, you're saying this is how much money I can make you this year.
Right. That's
right.
What she
and so
said.
so we are saying that she
understating it.
Is understanding what she can make, and you need to make.
Well, you need to increase that statement because the downside is that we're going to ask the taxpayer
pay
basically pay more, and then now we're going to pay more, and they're going to make more, and now we're going to have a surplus.
Right.
And we want to try to get it as close as possible, not underestimate, not overestimate.
Right.
Now, what's the downside to overestimating in this situation? Is a question. We don't make as much as what we budgeted for. We didn't ask the taxpayers to pay enough to meet the difference. So what happens then?
So you either have to find savings in in one of the other accounts, in the Board of Selectmen account. Let's say you budgeted 500,000, you came in with 475,000. You either have to have 25,000 more come in other revenue accounts, which is altogether possible because you have building funds, other things like that, which are estimates based upon certain things. Or we didn't record all of the state funds because we like to be conservative on that as well. And so we've made up the 25,000 because other revenues were higher. If the other revenues do not cover that, then you either have to take it out of the 400,000 contingency in the Board of Finance's budget, or ultimately look to cut expenses of 25,000. And since the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed, for that matter, have both been having surpluses at the end of their year, that is not significant. And worse comes to worse, if everything else fails, we increase an appropriation by 25,000 and take it out of the general fund, which is over the minimum amount that they're looking for anyway. But the fact is that the way I look at it is the same way that F&B has instructed very clearly the Board of Ed to be more accurate in their excess cost reimbursement. The various component parts of the Board of Selectmen should be doing the same. It should be a consistent message.
Also, to your point, yes, the Treasury is a distinct operation within the realm of many other things that are going on. And I don't like to set up targets that are too high, because you don't want to induce the person to take more risks than he or she would be taking otherwise. But you want to have a realistic number that you think is attainable, and maybe leave yourself a little cushion. And also you want to understand how this number came about, which Jack and I don't understand right now. how are you gonna go from, and still after I talked to her, how are you gonna go from 267 in 6 months to 300,000 in 1
To
year?
only 300,000.
Right.
She is at 300,000 at the end of January, all right? So next year, she is recording the amount that we earned in January. What's in the budget is the amount that was already earned in January. And there's 5 months more of earnings here, and the run rate is higher than the first 6 months if I was looking at what the run rate on this is. To come out and say that you're only going to make 300,000 again, which you made in 7 months this year. It's just not I don't need to get into yield curves, anything else. I just need to look saying, interest rates aren't significantly changing. If anything, even if they do a little dip now, they're going back up. That's what the Fed said they were going to do. So, and there's no big run on our cash funds right now. And if there was a big amount, then we'd probably do a supplemental tax to replenish it. So if there's no changes in those funds, I don't understand how you can record what you made in 7 months for the next year. I mean, that's really my simplistic explanation of it.
Yeah, it's a point well made. I think the unknown factor here is what the investments are. We have no way of knowing what the risk is, and
There are minimal risk.
But we don't know those facts.
No, that we do know from what she's saying. She's putting the money
So
in
there
the
are
bank.
all the,
I think she has
What-
certain parameters as
Right,
treasurer.
she's not just out there.
She's not able to
So-
invest in a lot of risky things.
Right.
What's the trade-off in
Okay.
terms of going for the different estimates?
So in that case, what you do in the private industry, and actually the not-for-profit that I'm working on now, and I used to be in the private sector, is you need to benchmark. You need to see, it doesn't matter if interest income comes in lower than you had budgeted. If interest rates have been falling off, there's nothing you can do about it. It's not like in the budget when they order the jerseys for their hockey team. They can order fewer jerseys and just use the old ones. But this is depending on things that we don't actually know, and it's correct to be conservative. But how conservative do we want to be, and against which benchmark do we measure? And I think a good benchmark would be the one that I mentioned earlier, which is the government-secured short-term interest rate that the state of Connecticut offers. And you don't have to put your money there. Don't give it to Hartford, but that's a good benchmark. Okay, and they're paying 2.46 right now for short-term money, and that's high liquidity, daily. You can call it daily. There's no better liquidity than that. And I don't think anything that has that type of quality credit profile where it's backed by government securities.
Yeah, and this is where actually Bert and I differ a little bit. I'm not interested in the policy. I think that's a Board of Finance issue. We used to have an investment policy committee in this town, and it went away. To me, what investments and what the internal policy is, that's a conversation between the Board of Finance and our treasurer, who I think does a very good job and was very wise to move her money out when she did in 2007.
Yes.
And so my concern is strictly budget. And on the simplistic form, you have under-recorded your anticipated income for next year. And I'm willing to be conservative and, not say that you should put down 600,000, but I think making 500,000 there, which is an addition of 200,000 in income, is not a stretch. And it's something that I would like to bring forward to the Board of Finance and have them have that conversation. They did it last year, and they increased revenue last year as well from what was in budget.
And to your point, Jack, that having additional income shown for budget would keep constant the current conservative philosophy is taken now. Because the 267, I dare say, is probably based on very conservative principles of investment. And you're just simply saying the budget should reflect a full 12 months, full load of income,
Right, not 7.
without changing investment strategies or anything.
Right, I'm not going into that you can earn more, that's a whole separate conversation, I like to keep that, I'm just looking pure budget, and as I said, 2 times 270 comes out to 540, so move it to 500, still have some cushion in there, a 10% cushion essentially. Yeah,
They're currently budgeting
300.
about 50% of the expected, and you're recommending about 85% of the expected.
Yeah, thereabouts.
That seems more reasonable.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we agree, that's something I'd like to be able to move forward.
She's elected, and there are parameters in terms of the types of investments.
I'm fully aware. She does a good job.
I feel more comfortable saying, what, we feel that the number right now looks low to us. I would appreciate the Board of Finance meeting with her and having a discussion.
That's all we can say, and that's all I want to be in the position to say. I can't tell them a number.
Right.
I
don't want to take a sense of the meeting.
No, I'm not taking a sense. I'm not telling them what the number should be. Not my job. All I can say is it looks low. And actually, Jamie mentioned that at the presentation that we had some concerns, but I believe it's solely in the realm of the Board of Finance. But I'd like to be able to say we'd like you to look at this and go a little bit further. And if we have a consensus here to do that, then that says that it's not just Jack and Bert going in there, but rather the committee feels that this is something that should be explored by the Board of Finance and see if a modification should be made. Because I think Joan does a wonderfully conservative job and is definitely within the parameters. And had they not have that reserve and she stayed in, towns would have lost money. And Joan saw that and moved the money out rather quickly. And I think that was better to be doing what Joan did than worry about if you're making 10 basis points more. So.
I want to hear her rationale for the decision. I mean, she's got to have
Give her a call.
Clear reason for it. And I mean, there are reasons out there that I would respect and honor. I mean,
so I don't mean to put you on the spot, all right? But I'm going to. I just really am. She already has $300,000 in here at the end of January. Mm-hmm. What could possibly make you think that with us adding to our funds and that we're not having any reduction in funds, the interest rates, I did hear that there was a little twitter that they might actually lower rates, but that quickly went away. The Fed has said they're going to raise rates probably 3 times this year, all right? So they haven't done that yet. We can assume at least 2. I'm trying to understand what rationale she could possibly give us.
Well, I mean, this is for the fiscal year beginning, July 1st?
Yeah.
So it's still several months away, and it's for 12 months beyond that. I mean, there are geopolitical events that could happen that would cause our projections to change dramatically. I mean, I'm not trying to bet against it. Like, the world is changing really fast.
So I'll tell you what, pay my taxes on the $200,000.
So, Jack, also, aren't we talking about the investment income from excess cash balances?
Yes.
Which can fluctuate. It's a cash flow issue, and she may have a better idea of what the timing is of when the cash will be spent and when that goes up or down.
We should. This is the interesting aspect about what we're investing. We have balances, and Martha slapped me if I'm wrong.
Far away from you.
I'll do it for you.
The fact is that you can't look at what the general ledger cash balance is, because we have other accounts similar to, that we've taxed for. So we have a capital account that we're not bonding. We've taxed for it. We've collected those funds. We haven't done the project yet. Those funds are sitting in the bank, but they're sitting in the capital reserve account. So the total amount of funds that we have available to invest is typically far greater than the fund balance in the general fund, because it's all of our cashes
It's not all,
together.
right.
So it's not just what we're getting in. Besides that, we tend, other than we had the little flip last year when people were trying to prepay their taxes in December to beat the rush. The fact of the matter is we have a very high collection rate. I mean, we're collecting 99% of our taxes, so we're not really experiencing too much of a cash flow problem here in this town. So that's what I'm saying is that in order to earn this amount, even at 1%, we're sitting there with some rather substantial funds out there.
So it's really, we're looking at the risk of if, we'll just use the 200,000 as a number, saying that's what she has to come up to.
Right.
But we're looking at the risk of if we leave it where, if she were to leave it where it is now, all the taxpayers are going to pay a little bit more, pay more now. We may end up with excess cash. The risk is that if she is a little more realistic about her budget, that something traumatic happens or doesn't happen as expected, and then we have to come up with $200,000 at the end. And what is that risk? I mean, is it pretty taken care of by all the other things that we're managing? And so
We do have a general fund balance. We're
Yeah,
going to be
so
talking about that. I mean, the general fund balance is, as an example, we appropriated and taxed last year for $98 million for the school budget. The end of the year, the school returned $700,000. So we tax for that. That $700,000 goes into the general fund. We have, and there's multiple reasons of why that occurred, and there's a little extra funds that came in on the Board of Selectmen side. So every year we're typically, because we're not going back at the end of the year and redoing an appropriation for the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Ed, which we would have to do if they were over their appropriations, every year we're contributing more into our general fund. So our general fund is building. So when something of a smaller nature occurs, then you make an appropriation not by taxing the taxpayers, but by making an appropriation from the general fund.
so our risk is low.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not like the state of Connecticut where they have a budget and 6 weeks later they have $200 million adjustments. And then another 6 weeks later they need another $200 million. This budget, the way you look at over the years, is right on the money. And that's because there's a lot of time that goes into this. We are discussing this since January now, and people have discussed it before. So that, and we spend another half an hour on maybe $200,000 or $300,000 that we think should be added to the revenue side. So people have spent a lot of time on that. And people are doing a tremendous job, at least compared to Hartford. But that's another benchmark that we don't want to really look at.
No. She's currently, her run rate is to make 700,000 annually if you were to multiply times 12. So even if it has a minor rate.
But that's what I'm saying. If we want this mill rate to go down, then she should take another look at this number, and that if she does raise it a little bit, the risk that it doesn't work is not high. So I'm okay if we ask her to raise it. Or at least take
explain the rationale.
Explain the rationale and the Board of Finance, it's their decision.
What we're going to do, so.
You expressed it well. Sense.
I'll show you. Okay, next item on the agenda. We'll go to a simple one. I am sure the Board of Finance will be discussing the extra FTEs at both the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen budget. On the Board of Selectmen budget, it's to add in 2 civilian dispatch, or 3 civilian dispatch, I'm sorry, and then redirecting the services of those civilian, of the current officers that are there, one to be a narcotics officer, so that narcotics officer can coordinate with the narcotics departments in both Stanford and Norwalk, which right now we don't have a dedicated person to do, which makes it a little bit more difficult. And then to add an SRO to the middle school, which has the Board of Ed support, has parent support, and based upon the input that we heard from some high school students that were there for a completely different project, said that in the high school you don't even think of this person as a police officer, but rather for certain people, you know, as we talk about the social-emotional needs of students, some people feel a little more comfortable speaking to that individual as opposed to maybe a teacher or somebody else. And so it's another support system that they were mentioning, and you know, they said he's a really nice person, and I think they already have somebody in mind to move over there. On the...
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
As far as, are they there all day long, or are they just there for like 3 hours in the morning, or
All day. All day.
all day.
all day?
But because they're a police officer, they report into the police chief. So if there was a town emergency, I'll use that better than that, there is a chance that they might have to be pulled for something else if there was a major something going on. Although they may actually keep them at the schools to keep them there as well. But they are a police officer, and then when they're not in school, they do regular police duty. So, but they're trained
And
to
is
do
it one dedicated person per school, so it's the same person
same person
every day?
Yep.
And what do they do all day?
Um,
I'm just trying to be, I don't,
I wish I could give you an answer.
I mean, I get that kids feel that they meet with kids and they talk to kids, but kids are in class. I mean,
I think they're making sure that people aren't, I don't want to sound like they're a narc, but, you know, there's a lot of, make sure I get this term right, my kids are all over it. There's a lot of vaping going on, there's other things that are going on in the schools, so they're watching, making sure things are secure.
so they do a little patrolling of the premises. They do a little, I'm just trying to understand what
They also
they
teach,
do.
they've also been brought in to teach.
So I don't understand.
I can't tell you what they do, you know, that, but they have taught.
Either health classes or sometimes
Okay.
civics kind of.
Yeah, they were brought into law and government class, and they taught a couple classes in there with the professor brought them, or the teacher brought them in. So they've become integrated. They're in the cafeteria during lunch. They eat with students and other things like that. Which, if I was there for 3 or 4,
And then what do they do in the
lunch shifts, I
summer?
would
And then what do
work
they
on
do in the
myself.
summertime?
They're cop.
So that they come back on regular patrol or whatever needs to be done in the police department.
Yeah. I mean,
And at that point in time, they would get like any of their continuing education that they want to do to. Like I know they send the police off for a
I
meal,
think they do that. Well,
and they wouldn't take them out of the school. They'd probably do theirs in the summertime. Kind of.
right. Well, actually, that's one of the things that we found when we were looking at the police overtime. Was that I was surprised, but you know, it's very hard to do training, which are required. There's a lot of state training required for police officers. So, if they come in to do all the training that they need, and if it's done in a group setting, they're guaranteed, based upon contract, a certain number of hours if they're coming in to do training. So that may be that I'm I'm having a training Saturday, and I have 4 hours guaranteed of pay time, and it's going to be overtime. So it's the equivalent of 6 hours. And that's part of the reason why the overtime is there, simply because you have to train and you can't be pulling them in off shift, or you have to replace them so somebody else is getting overtime. So that's when I started to look at the overtime and had a conversation with Captain and Police Chief, we were talking about the training. And I think as much as it was almost that I calculated roughly that a police officer's salary is approximately 105% of their base salary, because they work, well, it's probably a little more, it's probably about 107. But the amount of hours that they have to put in with training comes to be about 105% of the hours that they're supposed to work. And since the training is done typically, off rotation, then that's time and a half. So it's just a nature of the beast.
And there's some crazy people who have suggested that teachers carry to school. I think I'm much more comfortable to have a police officer there who knows what he's doing.
I'm not having that conversation. F&B, we
Very off agenda.
I'm putting that one in the bud because everybody has their opinion on that. But I wish I could give you more information.
And the narcotics person becomes a full-time narcotics person?
Yes. What's happening in the narcotics, from what I understand, I have a friend who's a detective in Stanford, and very close friend. And most of what's going on, especially in the narcotics and the recognition that there's an opioid and what's going on with even the other drugs that are out there, it goes across several towns. So whenever there's an investigation, it's probably involving 3 or 4 towns, as well as which of the Fed agencies is it that does drugs?
DEA.
DEA, okay. And I'll tell you, it was, just to do it, I was with a friend and we went to IKEA, and they have the food trucks over there. And so we stopped at the food trucks, and as we were at the far end, as we were walking back, all of a sudden, my friend and I had a gun pointed at us. And I'm telling you, I could see inside the nozzle as these cops came out of no place, including DEA and other things. And it was a drug bust of somebody, and they told people to get down. I understood. I took my female friend and moved her quickly away from that, and then we moved away. But yeah, so these are coordinated efforts. I'm telling you, I saw it all the way.
So our narcotics guy will be working
in conjunction with, so if there's an investigation, there's a dedicated person to work with it. And they share a lot of information. And right now, without having a dedicated person,
they won't share information with us?
No, it's not. You're not sharing it on a consistent basis. You don't have that consistency that's there. So I think that, since everybody wants to address the opioid crisis and try and get as much of that off the streets and other things like that, and for those who need help, get help, it makes sense. I know that Jamie is very strongly involved with this. My son is an EMT up in the New Haven area, and I can't even tell you how many things of Narcan he goes through in a week. So he said to the people in some of these inner cities, it's how somebody might think of taking some Tylenol is what giving out Narcan. So it's and he goes, it's not all in the city. It's widespread. So anyway, so it's a good idea. I just curious for everybody to go around the room and have everybody's feedback on the school psychologists or the addition of the staff. I know we don't like adding FTEs, but does anybody have a problem or have any thoughts on that?
We might look like a bad guy if we did.
No, I don't care if you look like a bad guy. I do it all the time.
I think they both been discussed extensively in meetings, and I thought the discussions were intelligent and to the point. I support.
But the initial justification of the psychologist was a little bit loose, and then they brought it together and feel good with it.
Yeah, I actually thought Tara's presentation to the Board of Finance was the best summary of it that I had heard today. I told her.
I just think that the most propositions at the town level and at the school level have something in common. They're the sign of our times. You know, and you can see that the justification comes from what has changed all around us. And so I think it behooves the town and the school system and us to support it.
Yeah, I think we're actually behind. I think Jamie mentioned that as a community, we're probably a little behind some of our peer towns on having SROs in high schools and middle schools.
Jack, I support both. The only question I have is when it comes to the dispatchers, who will they be drawn off of to populate these 3 civilian dispatchers? Who will be, do we have any ideas, any explanations?
Retired policemen.
One option is retired policemen. That's why you can go and not go into the defined benefit plan and you have that other contribution plan because they can do that. But they can also, I mean, I know a dispatcher in Stanford Police Department, and a regular person, that's their job. So, you know, there's certain skill set they have. That's why I think Jamie calls them a communicator. But, you know, if you're dispatching and that's what you do, there's the proper way to do it and other things like that. And there's a consistency there. Not that the police officers are doing a bad job at all, but, you know, when you're doing something and this is what you're trained for, you may be doing it slightly better or more efficient. So, anybody else? Okay, so
You're going to open it up to all, are you referring to all FTE conversation or just those 2 groups of FTEs?
There's also department heads conversation, right? Like, it's the only other
no,
thing.
that's we're not talking about that. That's in, and we're not changing that. I mean, we can talk about it, but I don't know what we're going to accomplish.
I mean, isn't all the rest of this in too? Like, what do you?
No, because we
That's
can make
actually
it
not
because you
that's
can't
actually
have
not where I was
FTEs.
going.
Okay,
That's
but go ahead, David.
That's not
I'm
where I was
sorry.
going.
Okay.
What we heard from Park and Rec was they have 2 new parcels of property and therefore they need to replace a body, right?
That's by the way is part of this, so that's very much so. That's one of the additional bodies.
You know, for the psychologists, they provided us the amount of hours that psychologists spent doing each various task to justify the fact that there was a shortage of manpower to fulfill all of the necessary tasks that needed to be accomplished. All we heard, or all I heard from the Park and Rec team was, we now have high field and we have, you know, short lane and we need to take care of them, so we need to replace this body. I still think that it might have been a cheaper option to do something with providing overtime to the existing employees, because during the time period in which Highfield needs to be mowed, it's going to be light until 8 p.m. and it's in a place where it's not going to disturb any residences, so they can mow till 6 o'clock, and my understanding is those guys get off at 4. So offering, you know, overtime or those types of things, or finding a seasonal part-time worker in lieu of a full-time employee, seems like it might be a more efficient way to go than to end up with the benefits and the healthcare benefits and the pension of a permanent employee, especially since we didn't see, there was no documentation that said our guys are currently working 55 hours a week, and, you know, here are the types of things that they're doing, and you can't possibly keep up. I didn't see anything like that.
I echo exactly what he said.
And didn't short lane get cut?
Yes.
The improvement to short lane
got cut, but they still some maintenance.
They
They
make
still have grass, but
a very small amount of grass, and I guess picking up any trash or that kind of thing.
I think you raised, I think you raised some very valid points. And
I concur with that.
I agree too.
Same.
so the consensus is that that's something that we might want further conversation and discussion and review.
Yeah, Jack, I'm not going to comment on anything to do with the dispatchers and the police, but I do support the psychologist.
Yeah, I think, I don't support where they're accounting for it. I'm a dog with a bone. I'll deal with that next year. But I do concur. I also believe once they go and they start looking at it, and this is something that I've spoken to both Taylor and Stacy about, I believe that the new school psychologist will probably not be working 50% on special ed or 504s, but probably closer to 60 or 70%. I think that we're delivering services now in conjunction with our IEPs, but a lot of work is being done off-site by our school psychologists. Because if they're supposed to be working 36 hours in a 6-day week, and the analysis we got showed that they were working closer to 42, which made me believe that they probably lied about that, and they're working about 48. When I did the numbers, and something that Deb raised, Deb Ritchie on the board, that I think that they have a need just to deal with the special ed 504s and to make sure that that's being met within the contractual guidelines. So that's not to say that teachers don't go home and do lessons plans also, but within reason, I think that the school psychologists are really putting in a lot of time so that they can handle everything else. So
I'll just state for the record that I'm in full support of the psychologists. You know, the number of hours they're working and the number of hours we need to, have when anyone's working isn't so much a concern for me as the proactive work that they'll be doing in the classrooms and the positive impact they should have on both the children and the budget in the future by putting them in. So
I'm glad you raised that. That was a point that Dennis mentioned, and that if you want to address some of our quote-unquote special ed needs or other things like that, working with children earlier, the whole thing with the SRBI is that whole same concept. The earlier starting to work with families or with children or other things like that, or just a little skill here, a little skill there, with the teachers, may in fact have a child not have other problems that then have to be addressed down the road. So if you're looking at what can we do proactively, this is one of the things that I think is a proactive measure to save future costs down the road. Yeah, glad you mentioned that. Okay. On to, I was thinking the investment income had a long conversation to this one. There is a request by the Board of Selectmen to set up contingency for approximately, I'm going to say 450, but I believe it's 435,000 for our normal pension costs that are currently being discussed at the state level. The total amount would be phased in over a 3-year period. And I do want to make my one comment first, so I don't lose it. I looked at the towns that are paying more for their teachers, and lo and behold, when I go to any of the school rankings, they're the top schools in the state. And in fact, in our DIRG, 8 of the towns, with the exception of Joe Barlow, which is the combined high school, regional high school 9, combined of Easton and Reading, all 8 of our DIRG are in the top 10 schools. On the list that I looked at, they were 13th, Joe Barlow, because regional high schools are ranked 7th. And so part of the argument is because we pay our teachers more, we have better schools. Well, that makes sense until you look at the fact that we're paying 13th. By the way, we're in, out of our schools, we're in the bottom of the towns because they don't count Joe Barlow separately. Only Easton pays a lower premium, and that could be on the longevity of your teachers and other things like that. But Stanford's payment over the median rate is 25%, twice what we're paying. And they're not ranked in the top 100. And Norwalk also has a similar situation. And they're also not ranked there. So the concept that we pay our teachers more, and that's why our schools are better, doesn't hold a lot of water. I also looked at schools such as Farmingdale, Avon, Guilford, all of which are top 20 schools, Glastonbury in the state, and our mill rates fluctuate. So while some of them are low, some of them are still 30 basis points or higher for what they're paying. But the other interesting thing that I wish would be mentioned time in and time out is that while it's nice to look in a vacuum and say that because we pay our teachers above the average that we should be paying into that pension plan more, the percentage we're above, 99.5% of our taxes go to the state and we don't get it back. So where are they going? Well, let's see. They're going to pay for everybody else's pension plan, so we're almost paying twice. And that's the fallacy of what's going on here. I'm not going to mention the gentleman's name, but his suggestion on how he wanted to do regionalization was a little bit crazy. You can figure his name from there. He one time made the statement that New Britain has twice as many students of Greenwich, and yet Greenwich's pension liability is twice that of New Britain. Well, yes, if you look at it from that perspective, that is correct. However, the town of Greenwich provides 10% of the total taxes received in the state of Connecticut. How about you take some of Greenwich's taxes and put it towards their pension plan, as opposed to New Britain, which gets back $4 for every dollar they contribute. And the state, in my opinion, should spend a little less time worrying how towns should be run and worry about how the state is run. Because that is part of the problem that we're all dealing with, although I'm not opposed to paying for pensions for our teachers. So the question then becomes, what is currently ahead of legislation is that we would pay a certain percentage for the next 3 years until we paid essentially 25% plus whatever we're over the median teacher salary, whatever that percentage is, into our pension plan. And it looks like we start with $400,000 and it's like a third, a third, a third, and at the end of year 3, our contribution would be an incremental $1.2 million of taxes from the town. The question is not to debate whether or not.
Every year.
Yeah. The question is not to debate that one way or another. They don't want. There's a concern up in Hartford of making us pay for the full pension plan, because if they did that, many of the towns could then argue, tell you what, we'll take on our own pension plan and we'll manage it ourselves. If we have to pay for the whole thing, we'll manage it, we'll negotiate it with our local teachers, and they've heard that from several of the towns, especially, not just downstate, but some of the other schools, because we do that now with many of our other unions. So why don't we take it, give us whatever you can attribute to our teachers now, and we'll just fund the rest of it going forward, and we're done with your plan. And I'm all in favor of that as well. I think it's a lot better for the town to do that. That being said, the question that I have before us is that the Board of Selectmen requested the Board of Finance to consider adding a contingency to this budget for $435,000, even though the legislation is not complete and the dollar is not done at this time. So I'd like to hear other people's thoughts, and I'm going to go to Stacy first because that way I can have my thought expressed, since we share our opinions.
And I'm shaking my head no. I don't want to tax people before we know what's coming from the state. I've heard, we've discussed when this happened a couple of years ago, when this was suggested a couple of years ago, we also discussed having a separate state tax, so that we could put, this is what it costs to run your town. This is what we're getting taxed from the state. I like that. What do we add?
I don't doubt that something's going to happen. I don't know what it is. But at $400,000, I believe we can handle that in our existing funds. And worst comes to worst, we can replenish the general fund by taxing next year for whatever it is that we have to double up.
Yep.
I am against taxing our citizens for it. I'll also say that there's a little bit of a complication here, because I believe that the expense should be in the Board of Ed budget, not the town side. The Board of Ed teacher pension.
The other part is if you...
You can't add it to the teacher fund, because if we add and increase their appropriation by $435,000 and it doesn't happen,
The other part is if
they don't have to give it back.
They can spend it somewhere else.
You got it.
the other part is if you put that in, you're kind of sending a message to the state saying you're okay
Yeah,
with that.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
You're saying like, well,
But I hate the supplemental tax strategy, so if we can avoid that by using,
I don't think we need to do any tax in the first year for
Not the first year.
$400,000.
not the first year.
What is the timing if it happened? What?
I don't think we would know until June, okay, which is after our budget. If this was $1 million, all right, I might be more willing to have a conversation to see whether or not it's that. But and again, we don't control the general fund. That's the Board of Finance's purview. But I think that it was important for me to hear what the committee was thinking on this, so that when we're having conversations with the Board of Finance, we can say, this is what F&B believes. We can cut that, by the way, at budget if we don't agree.
The other concern I have is sort of like the devil's in the details, where I have no problem paying pensions to people who have earned it. I want to honor that. However, if we have a teacher who worked in Norwalk for most of their career and then came to Darien for the end of the career, are we liable for that whole pension obligation, or is Norwalk going to be liable for some of it and we're going to be liable for some of it?
Do you want to answer that? Because you... I had the same concern.
Yeah.
We're doing normal pension costs, so we're only dealing with the pension costs associated with the current year,
Okay,
not prior pension.
got it.
All the other ones were going to be an actuarial mess to try and figure out
Right.
if somebody worked 10 years in Norwalk and 10 years in Darien, but you underfunded the 10 years that was going in Norwalk, how much Norwalk owns of what's going on versus how much Darien owns on what's going on.
Right.
The other thing that I would love to see, and Dr. Landon said, oh, they are paying 7% in, I would like to see the state, for new teachers, have them have the availability to pay Social Security, which they do not now, so that they can draw down on Social Security, and that would reduce the pension amount. They get a significant amount of what their salary is based upon the fact that, and I think they can get as much as 75% of their final 3 years' earnings, but it's also based upon the fact that they could have made a reasonable salary, and instead of pulling $30,000 out of Social Security, if that's close to the max, they can't. So they're not eligible for Social Security. And I know a situation where a woman's husband passed away, and he was on Social Security, but because she was a Connecticut teacher, she was not allowed to take the spousal amount.
Wow.
Right.
That's a little, I mean,
So,
her as a teacher, her she's separate, but that was his Social Security.
Yeah,
She got it.
she didn't pay that,
Any
so
other
she's not
person-
entitled, but I
we
don't understand why she can't do it.
referred,
Yeah, not his benefits.
we referred her to a close labor
Oh,
attorney
yeah.
friend of mine.
I would definitely do that.
But yes, so that's how crazy it gets. But I believe that teachers, well, new teachers should pay into Social Security, and that would change what we have to fund in pensions.
That's
It's-
not,
it's-
that's not
think
even a
there's any
conversation being
dissenting
had,
opinions
right?
about
No, that's the problem. That's not even a
Jack,
conversation
we
being
would
had.
have to pay the employer portion of Social Security,
That's fine.
okay? Just so
No, I understand there's expense to it, but it's,
7%.
yeah, but,
Yeah, South Carolina
yeah, but
does.
there's an expense,
Yeah,
but
South
it's not
Carolina.
25%.
I mean, my mother was a teacher her entire life, and she draws Social Security.
If it matters where you work.
I don't know
My-
what, I don't know what the,
Friend's mother was
What
in
state
New
was
Jersey
she
and
in?
didn't need it.
yeah.
New
I-
York
Well, but
State
South
was
Carolina is another kind of.
New York
different.
teachers paid into Social Security, and both my parents were educators. My mom taught in New Jersey, Florida, and New York City. My dad taught in New York City. They all paid in Social Security. They got Social Security.
Connecticut's one of 6 states that
Yeah.
opt out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Jack,
that's really
I
bizarre. I
concur
didn't-
with the
yeah.
analysis that this might actually enable the legislation we're seeking to avoid.
Okay. So
Wait, I have more.
Given that,
yeah.
Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
No, you can go.
No, you go first.
I'm gonna change the subject slightly, so go ahead.
I was going to say this also. I've also put this in the category of ECR and the investment income conversation that we're taxing people for overtaxing.
I was just gonna say that this isn't the only proposal coming from Hartford that could impact this, right? So, I mean, if they pass like the
Car
vehicle,
tax.
the vehicle tax,
Yeah.
exactly, like that's gonna blow a huge hole in our budgets, and then we're gonna end up right with the supplemental tax.
Most
I assume.
probably, I would assume.
So then this just gets rolled in with that.
I would agree with you. That's we had that conversation earlier today, Mike and I, that if any of the other things that could affect us down the road that they're talking about, then, and this happens too, then it can all get rolled into one. But if we needed to replenish the general fund, we could just add it
That's the next year.
next year's tax and say we're adding 400,000. Sorry about that, guys.
Yep.
But so I think the last thing, did I cover all the budgets except for one? That was the I'll deal with it in 2 ways. Is there anything in capital at either any project in capital on either the Board of Ed side or the Board of Selectmen side that somebody would like more information on? How's that? That's a better way to put it.
I would like to explore the police cars. I heard Jamie mention that, we were involved in moving them to a 3-year rotation several years ago, and they did it kicking and screaming, but it turned out not to be a problem at all. We even put extra money, some people have heard this, in a maintenance account for them, and it was never touched. I would like to explore the possibility, I guess they're asking for 4 cars, at least trying to limit it to maybe 2 cars, because it's not only the replacement cost of the police cars, but there's a very significant upcharge in transferring the equipment every time. So, there's no doubt down the road, Darien is going to get less and less money. So it may not be significant, but I think we have to look at areas where possibly we can make some savings.
If I'm not mistaken, I think that Jamie also mentioned, or maybe John mentioned, during the presentation, was it last Tuesday, that I believe the governor was looking to expand the car replacement at the state level from 3 to 4 years as a way of doing savings. So if the governor is thinking about that, and I'm not saying that everything they do in Hartford is right, but they do get some things right. And as I said, 90% of the legislation is voting for kittens and puppies, so they get all that right. But that's something that I think is worthwhile of them exploring. I think Jamie also was interested in exploring during the budget process the fire engine replacement, because there were some years that we were seeing if we could adjust that. One of the changes that we've suggested this year, in the past, for several projects, the Board of Selectmen would accrue going over a number of years. So they have a $200,000 project that they know they're doing in year 4, and they would accrue $50,000 per year. Instead of, when the project is ready, come in and say, we have this $200,000 project. And it's something that has been done here in this town for probably 30 plus years. And the concept is to smooth the capital. But I like consistency. So if the Board of Ed doesn't get to allocate things out, the Board of Selectmen shouldn't get to allocate things out. And so we did some challenges on that this year. And certain things were taken off, or as we suggested, we have no problem with moving things forward. So in the case of Ox Ridge, they moved the 2-year accrual forward. I believe Short Lane had about $200,000 or $300,000 in 2 years, and that's to work on that. And so they deferred that to the next year to look at. But that's one of the things that I want to have a further review of, to make sure that the only thing that we're accruing for is the public works and the fire engines. And then someplace down the road we can ask why we're accruing for fire engines and not just bonding.
Well, aren't we accruing a town hall capital reserve?
Yeah, we're looking at that too. I want them all looked at. I think that, I understand that there's certain projects that, and I think some of the reserve is that they have it, but, when you're seeing I've approved this and I have this running amount, I have a little problem with that. It may have worked in the past, but we need to relook at some of the things that we're doing just going forward, as we're going to have greater expenses coming from the state. And, people are concerned about having rising taxes. you know, especially in this environment and with some of the changes that have gone on. So, you know, we can challenge, doesn't mean we're going to get it, but we'll raise those areas. So, is there anything else on any of these budgets that?
Yeah, I have one item, Jack. When we first discussed the healthcare cost for the town employees, we didn't know what the amount would actually come out to be because the negotiations had not concluded yet. But they have in the meantime, and actually the town administrator found a few $100,000 in savings in negotiating this. We also heard from the Board of Education that the administration is negotiating their health care package, and that's supposed to be done by early March, if I remember.
I usually expect it to be in the middle to late March, so I think we're a little bit ahead of that.
So we know nothing about that, and we don't know where that is going. But it would be interesting to know if a few $100,000 can be found there also.
Well, what I'll do is I will, I'm sure we're going to see Tara tomorrow.
Okay.
And we can ask her what the status is of the healthcare, whether or not it's the firm number. But Martha, jogging your memory, I thought that when they came in, you know, occasionally they would do their adjustment to the healthcare at the Board of Ed. I thought that was mid to March. Yeah, I thought it was in that time frame when it would come out.
That's what you always say.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that it comes every year. I mean, that's the thing. Sometimes this is the estimate. It is what it is. So.
Two things that popped into my head when you started talking about healthcare. One is you had initially started talking about the state plan as opposed to buying it privately. And is there any prohibition on leveraging the purchasing power of the combined town and schools in terms of negotiating pricing against the likes of Anthem or whomever it may be? Because the bigger the pool of bodies you have, the better it is for the insurer.
That has been raised in the, what's that?
The shared services.
Thank you. The Shared Services Committee. And
That's at the state level?
No, that's town level.
Okay, all right.
Based upon from what I understand in the past, okay, the town would save money and the Board of Ed would be killed. Because the composition of the Board of Ed, of the town employees changes their mix when they go out to bid. It's an older group. I mean, we have cafeteria workers that are 80 years old.
It skews the risk pool negatively.
Right. So the town saves a little bit of money,
Which makes sense.
but what the Board of Ed loses may be bigger. I haven't seen any of the final numbers, but that is the rumors that I have heard every time this is looked at. I can't say that I've ever seen any analysis. Nobody, far too unimportant for them to show me.
And it was the library that went on the state plan, right? And they saved money doing that.
I believe they did, but again, I think that if you looked at the library for their employees,
The skew of the pool is younger.
I would tend to believe that you have a, well, why am I talking?
No, that's.
Go ahead.
No, and also, when somebody comes on, the assumption is that person is single, because a lot of them are,
Yes,
which, so,
Yeah.
that's a different.
Okay.
right. So, yeah, I think it's interesting that the library pool and the Board of Ed pool is probably more similar. You know, with how they're composed of that. So that's why the library was able to save money. Is there any discussion other than the library came up with the smallest increase of anybody? Okay, done.
One other random thing is OpenGov. They did a good job, the town. It's pretty cool. And I think increasing, going forward, it's going to be a benefit to all of us to be able to go on there and do this, manipulate the numbers.
I would like to see OpenGov have the line items that it doesn't have now, because I think that gives us more analytical as well as quarterly updates on where we are in spend and other things. But I do think Kate did a really good job there were a lot of adjustments that went on, but I told Kate that I personally thought she did a very good job in the budget. One of the things Kate did was exactly what Taylor was doing on the Board of Ed side, which is looking at what the original budget was and then seeing what they spend. And it reminds me of one of the Raiders movies where they're choosing the cup, and as Kate said, some people budget poorly. So, and others budgeted fairly well. So that gave her some flexibility when she was looking at the budget. And so it means like something that what Taylor's been doing on the Board of Ed is very helpful on evaluating the budgets and that. I quickly want to just cover 3 more things, and then we can call it a wrap after. Well, all right. First, why don't we do the minutes first? I mean, have to order, but that way we get them done. Were there any changes to the 2 sets of minutes? One done by somebody who knows what they're doing, the other by the acting person who just tries to get something on a piece of paper.
One was longer than the other.
We had more things to discuss.
One was somebody who knew what they were doing. Is there any problems to that? If not, can I have the meeting of February 7th?
February 7th.
Do I have somebody move it? David? And second?
Second.
James. All in favor? Remember, anybody who wasn't there, you can't vote. So,
By the way, Jack, that has changed. The rules of Roberts have changed. You are allowed to vote even if you were not at the meeting on the minutes, because you don't vote. You vote on the veracity of the proposal or the document and the trustworthy of the person. So you can vote now.
Okay, then I vote.
Okay.
Tammy, you
can I look up the meaning of the word veracity on minutes that I've done? All right, the meeting for the 25th, do I have a motion to move? Stacy?
I was there for that one.
And second?
Second.
Okay, James, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay. We have a couple little projects here. Iris, I gotta tell you, when I read your email, what was number 2?
Oh, that's the one about the lease on the town land.
Okay, we have something that we're looking at least. We're doing some preliminary work. I'll get you involved with that with Mike so that you're aware of what's going on. That's
Okay.
all I'm going to be able to say right now at this stage. So it's all preliminary work. So we'll bring you to the...
Fine, I just wanted to answer your email, so.
Okay, super. So we have that. What was one of them? The motions that we did on the reserve will be addressed hopefully by April. Wayne has doing the final look at the final thing, so the reserve accounts will all be basically completed. On the convenience fees, it's really becoming, David gave a very nice rough first look at of what's going on. We haven't had a chance to talk a little bit, but my vision, I think it was pretty much here with the same thing that David had, is that there's several parts to it. One is, what are all the payments we're accepting now, regardless of how we take it? So, some of these we're not going to be able to take anything other than cash. That the example I heard earlier today was if you go to the town clerk and ask for a fishing, hunting, and trapping license, all right, and you as an individual get all 3 of those licenses, the town collects the money, gives it to the state, and the town gets $1. If 3 people go, and one person goes for a trapping license, one person goes for a hunting license, and one person goes for a fishing license, so the same 3 licenses being given out, the town gets $3 for processing that. The rest of the money all goes to the state. So we can't even take anything but cash or a check, because I don't know if it's legal for us to even do a convenience fee to any of those other items. So one of the things is, what are the current payments we're doing now? That's one thing. Second thing is, what are the payments that are here? Because I was talking to somebody about settlement finality, and why in certain cases you do a Fed wire or even a CHIPS payment, because at the end of the day it's settled by Fed wire, and there's a difference in settlement between ACH or direct debit and that, because there's a callback period you're allowed to have on an ACH payment, so which you can't on a Fed wire. It's immediate available funds and it's final when sent. This is what I did for 10-15 years at Chase. So it's looking at all that, whether or not we can even do Venmo, what type, should we be able to take a PIN for a debit, because a debit transaction is less than a credit card transaction. And so there's all these payments, what are the finality, what are the settlements, and what's going on. Then a look at what we are currently doing, all right, who's charging, who's not, what are the fees that we're paying, whether or not we don't have 4 different merchants here, which means that we're paying more. I'm pretty sure we are. And then there's the various economies and other things like that. So that's a whole look at the whole project, of which convenience fee is there. I mean, Iris, you mentioned, why can't we do a direct debit on some of these payments, which quite honestly is one of the lowest cost items for a bank to charge a commercial customer, of which a government organization is. It's even less than a debit card. And any time that you're doing a bill pay, it's being paid by ACH, I promise you, unless they're writing a separate check. But that's why it takes 2 days, but it allows all these things to occur, and we're not taking ACH currently here. Direct debit, sorry. Debit direct. So there's all these things, and we've been asked to assist the Board of Finance in working with Rob Cordone and Diana in moving this along, which is very similar to what we did in the reserve. So anyone who wants to chip in with Dave and myself, even if it's just taking a small part of that, it'd be welcome. So, because this is another loan that I don't like giving up on. I think we're paying about $300,000-400,000 a year in bank fees.
At a bare minimum, consolidating the processors will save us money. Even if we don't get to the point where we have convenience fees for everything.
Right. But, and then there are people, I think I was speaking, I may have been to Palin, but there are enough systems that allow you to front end all of our payments and then feed into the various systems that they need. And so that would be nice to look at. So anybody who's interested in teaming up with us on that would be much appreciated. We can use some analysis and work of what's being done to move that on to help the Board of Finance come up with, to me, it's an overall cash management policy. It's and how we're going to be dealing with the future. We have more and more millennials coming in here, and a lot of us transact business with our kids on either Zelle or Venmo anyway. I don't think they know what a check is. That goes with a payphone And, they don't understand this either. So, but, or 45 for that matter. Or why record labels mattered at one time. But anyway, so that's it for me. Is there anything else that anybody wants to cover?
Were you gonna talk about number 3, the ag ordinance thing?
Oh, that's the one I keep on forgetting for good reason.
Sorry. You could just table it, I'm okay, but I don't know if you...
No. I have, and I apologize, and if you guys want something different, you can tell me and I will renege. The bag people, or the no bag people.
You should have called the bag ladies.
Yeah, the bag ladies. Requested coming to our committee to discuss their version of the bags. I said no. I said that number one, most of us are pretty knowledgeable of what's been going on in town. Number two, unless you're going to speak to us about the finances, which you guys don't have knowledge on, that's not our purview, and you don't get to market your concept through every committee, because that's just not how the RTM should be working. So I said no, we have enough to do. They also, by the way, congratulated us in early February for being done with the budget because the Board of Ed voted on it. Told me that they have no idea about town government because we were first starting our work then. There are some interesting things going on. I am going to give out the ordinance as I know it today. I'm interested in any and all comments of financial nature on that. I've already passed on to Kate that if the enforcement is done by a volunteer, and this volunteer then becomes an agent of the town, if they are an agent of the town, what is our liability? Should they get into a car accident? Or should they disrupt a business? Or who's going to do the training? What?
A fist fight over
the bags. Yeah. I mean, not that they're going to do that, but this isn't just a volunteer like any of us driving back and forth to an RTM meeting because they are enforcing something which is totally allowed. In my limited legal opinion, they were an agent of the town, or would be perceived to be an agent of the town, and that has a whole bunch of legal questions associated with that. And based upon the initial answer that Kate gave to the Public Works Committee, I restated it saying, no, can we check with our insurance? Because I'm not even sure we can get liability insurance coverage.
I don't know
on
how such a person would not be. The basic agent principle law is based on perceptions. Well, how do people perceive a person, and whether or not they have authority to act? And
They do. They can give a ticket.
well,
We should
they're an
find out
agent
what
of
the
the
other
town.
towns are
Boom.
doing.
That's,
Yeah, right. There wasn't.
that's
I
not-
knew they were, even if they weren't going to give a ticket. But now that you can give a
If you give a
ticket,
ticket, then you're acting with the authority of the town, and you are an agent of the town.
right? So, what is our increase in our liability, our coverage on automobile and?
Do we understand what the other towns are doing about this too? Are they absorbing it into the town, or do they have volunteers?
They have
because
some-
it has been passed a version in several other towns around us.
Okay.
So we don't have to recreate the wheel here. You can kind of find out what they did and see if it's similar to us. So
Certain towns,
Coming from the state too.
but
yeah, I mean, it's
well,
like it's kind of in flux at the moment.
certain towns are using existing staff, such as Norwalk and Stamford, already have a bigger staff in order to do certain enforcement of it. But I will give you my. I'm trying to think if I should.
I know what you're doing.
I don't care that Norwalk and Stamford has passed a law demanding, instructing businesses to charge cents. Louisiana just passed an anti-abortion law that is virtually the same as Texas that got kicked out. Bad laws are passed, and they know that they're a bad law. Louisiana knows it's a bad law, and it's in front of the Supreme Court. And just because Louisiana passed a bad law, I'm not suggesting that Connecticut do the same. Hence, just because Norwalk and Stamford have not dealt with what the Stamford attorney told them to do, I'm a little bit concerned on how the 10-cent charge. I did ask them whether or not that 10-cent charge is a taxable item. While it's not our job to tell our merchants that it is or it isn't, I'd love to have a ruling so that if they are getting it, they understand what the tax implications are, because there's certain clothing stores that if you buy under a certain amount on a certain day, that it's tax-free before the school year. Well, are those 10-cent bags still taxable? I mean,
Everything's gonna be taxable.
well, but right now they're not. Right now they're not. So that's something that we should understand. The training is something that Kate is concerned with. What the reporting requirements are. How do they, if they do provide a fine, how do they get the funds in? What is the payment mechanism for that? How does it work into Munis and other things like that, all of which have costs, and this is supposed to be a zero cost. If in fact the governor's proposal, I'm for banning bags, so I should say that, but his proposal is that it's a 10-cent charge and the state takes the whole thing. That's not the California method. California method is there's a charge. The merchant gets to keep some of it, and some of it goes to the state. That, I'm assuming, is going to be the compromise here. But if there's a 10-cent tax coming in from NED, and we have a 10-cent you should charge requirement, then are now these bags costing 20 cents?
Wouldn't you revise the ordinance?
Well, I think that actually we should defer the ordinance because until we know what's happening at the state level.
Coming at this from a different angle, and I might be really dated in my knowledge, but I remember a while ago that we were paying for every ton of trash that we put up, but we were getting paid for every ton of recycling. Now I know that China's not taking our plastic anymore or something along those lines. So is that still the case? Like even if we're putting plastic in there, we're getting paid for it?
No.
We're not.
It's interesting because it's clogging the machine, so City Carting, who does us, are not accepting bags. But I just went to a new garbage refuse collection for the house, and they are taking plastic bags, but I don't know where they're dropping them, and they're taking it in the recycling bin. Virtually every town, our contract isn't up yet. I think we're going to experience this next year. There was a recent article in The Advocate talking about the differentials, but virtually the only thing that really is still being collected, which is part of the reason why single stream might not work for this, is corrugated cardboard, because that is processed in the United States, and that's still being used other than pizza boxes. That shouldn't be in there anyway. But when you put corrugated into the rest of it, it doesn't necessarily get outsourced. In addition, glass is finding no home anymore. And so some state legislators have asked for the state to take on recycling of glass. That's part of the reason why, because I was reading some of the things there. Some of the changes where, like a town like Stamford, I'm going to make up numbers, might have been making $200,000-300,000 on their recycling, are now paying $300,000. So they had a list in this article based upon that change, based upon contract, where there's been some significant changes to some of the towns. And while this didn't happen to us this year, I would anticipate that when our next city quality contract comes up, we're going to see a revenue source become an expense source again. That it's just happening throughout the state, and some of the towns have asked the state to assist the municipalities by figuring out how to recycle some of this stuff, or help them out. So, if I find the article again, I'll pass it around. It was rather interesting. Anything else? Okay. Before, one other question. We're pretty much done with budget, aren't we?
Yeah.
I mean, we have a couple of things for the Board of Finance to figure out.
Yep.
But, so, unless something new comes up like the reserves, I don't see any, I mean, we're really far ahead of where we were in the prior years. But, does everybody agree?
Yep.
Okay, that means less meetings.
Well, if there's any changes, all we need to do is to update the Volpe report, right?
Yeah. Okay, now I'll take a motion to.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you all.